Hi, my name is Paul Karos, and I just did the keynote speech at Visions 2012. And it was a great honor to be the speaker for this wonderful conference. And what I wanted to tell you about is what I talked about, kind of on an abridged basis, since many of you could not be here at Visions 2012. And this is my home state, by the way, of Minnesota, so it's actually great to have the conference in my home state. I was diagnosed at the age of 8 with retinitis pigmentosa, one of the many retinal degenerative diseases that so many of the people here are coming to learn about. And it happened because my dad, when I was a very young boy, in his room, asked me to hand him the remote for the TV. He had a TV in his bedroom. And I went to go find that remote on the bed, and I kept patting around and patting around and patting around, and I couldn't find it. And he looked at me and said, "Son, give me the remote." And he got kind of angry because he thought I was teasing him. Well, it turned out I wasn't teasing him. And he very quickly figured out that there's something that my son can't see here. There's something wrong. And then I don't remember this part, but the next day we were out in the backyard playing baseball. And whenever he'd throw the ball to me on the ground, or even kind of a line drive to me, I could catch it, because there was contrast behind the trees or the grass. But anytime he threw it up in the air, I literally couldn't see it. He said I looked like a deer in the headlight. I didn't even know what was going on. And so he eventually, very soon after that, happened to be at a class reunion and met Bob Letson, who is the chairman of the eye department. He's retired now. And he told him to bring me in, and at age 8 they diagnosed me. And what I'm hoping to do here today for you is to talk to you about how tough this disease is, because it is tough. All these retinal degenerative diseases are very tough, and they create a lot of suffering. They create suffering in our life. They create suffering in our families' lives, sometimes our friends' lives. But the story doesn't end there, because it turns out that suffering can in many ways determine who we are and who we become. So I want to just tell you what happened after I was diagnosed. Very quickly I started to lose my sight, and it went extremely quickly. So quickly that they actually thought that I was going to go blind probably by the age of 15. Unfortunately, it kind of stabilized, although today I have about only maybe 1 or 2% of my sight. Today I can't see faces anymore. No text material have I been able to read for many, many years. I can't really be mobile without my cane, of course. So it has gotten now to a very decreased perspective, but it didn't go all at once, and that's the joy and the pain of this disease. But it is a very difficult emotional, developmental, spiritual event to have this type of a disease in our lives, or somebody in our family's lives. And here I want to point us to it's actually in the New Testament, and it's in the book of Romans. But as it turns out, all the religions of the world, whether it's the Jewish faith or the Muslim faith or the Buddhist faith, all of them take some view on suffering, because it's part of the human condition. It really is part of the human condition. And it goes like this. It says, "We rejoice in our suffering, for suffering brings endurance. Endurance brings character, and character brings hope. And hope never disappoints." So it's kind of crazy. We rejoice in our suffering. How crazy is that? Well, it turns out suffering or difficulty or pain, in our case, eye disease, although it can be many other things in life. It can be family dysfunction. It can be death of a loved one. There's many things. It can be abuse, addictions, all kinds of things that causes this suffering. But it turns out it is the suffering in our life and how we deal with it that literally can make us who we are. For it says suffering brings endurance. And what is endurance? Endurance is hanging in there. It's not giving up. It's persisting. It's like a marathon runner. They gain endurance, but they do it through hard work. and a lot of suffering, physical suffering in that case. So suffering brings endurance. Endurance brings character. So if we're really going to become people of great character, people of kindness, people of courage, people of forgiveness, people of love, joy, peace, we need some endurance, and we need some suffering. Great character then, bit by bit, can lead us to hope. And hope never disappoints. Why? Well, because we're always looking at the positive side. We're always looking at that side that, things are going to get better. Things are going to get better. For me, it was a very big challenge. I can remember being a teenager and crying myself to sleep at night. Angry at God, angry at the world, angry at everybody because nobody else had this eye disease. Why me? Not my brothers, not my sister, not my friends, none of our relatives. Why me? Or being at school and being teased. Why can't you see? And I'm convinced kids don't really try to be mean. Many times they're just curious. But we take it with a very shameful, hurtful, and after a while you literally start to think, maybe, am I weird? I'm different? Maybe I don't belong? Maybe I'm not worth being with? What are they going to think of me? All these are total feelings that I had as I was struggling with the process of beginning to lose my sight. Why can't I play the sports that my friends play? Why in gym class do I have to sit out? Because as the ball goes up in the ceiling, I can't see it between the light and the dark. So it was very, very stressful. And all the feelings of fear and insecurity, guilt, shame, all kinds of stuff that we or our family feels are, as I've come to learn over the last few decades, really a universal experience for people with eye diseases, but also people with many other things. And there were two people in my life that really helped me turn things around. One was actually my Sunday school teacher. It was our priest's wife. I'm Greek Orthodox, so priests can be married. And she kept telling me that, God loves you and he's got a plan. And I didn't believe him at first, actually, but I believe her at first, actually, but it turned out she kept telling me over and over. I thought, well, maybe, I don't know, never know. And then secondly was meeting Gordon Gunn. He owned the Minnesota North Stars here in Minneapolis. And I happened to be, our family happened to be friends with many of the North Star players. They were our neighbors. And so one of them, Lou Nanny, introduced us to Gordon Gunn. And he took the time to meet with me. I was 16 years old. And he was so kind, so warm, and encouraging. And I'll never forget going home that night and saying to myself, if he's blind and he does what he does, then maybe I can do something. Because I was literally at that time worried that I would never be able to have a full-time job in my life. I ended up going on to college. I graduated using tapes, reading all my books on tape, because by that point I couldn't really read text material without tons of magnification and things of that nature. I graduated with a finance degree, and I started working on Wall Street. My dad was at the head of a trading desk and got me an internship at a firm here in Minneapolis, again, Piper Jaffray. It's an investment bank, and I started in the research department. And I worked, and I worked, and I worked, and very quickly I got recruited actually to New York. I moved to New York, scared to death actually, because I was, visually impaired, moved to New York City from Minnesota, and but I did it. And I very quickly, in my field, became the #1 airline analyst in the world for 5 straight years on Wall Street. I traveled the world. I met with governments, CEOs of all the airlines, and I became the kind of go-to source. If you had a question about an airline stock, I was the #1 person in the world to go to. I then came back to Minnesota, where I'm from, and I became president of Piper Jaffray's Equities and Investment Banking Division, basically the investment bank of Piper Jaffray at that time. And it was an incredible experience. That was more of a leadership experience, not an analyst experience. And I tell you those things not to, say great things about myself, but really to show that even though we have a visual impairment, and even though we can't read text, And even though we have what we think are awkward social circumstances, that the vocational opportunities are enormous for us as visually impaired people, or if you have someone in your family that's visually impaired. The technology has changed so dramatically in the last few years that any text-based system, any text-based anything, we can participate and use our gifts and vocationally bear fruit. So it really was an incredible journey for me, from one of anger, probably denial and anger, and I many times talk about this as a death. Losing our sight is like a death. It's literally like a death because we're losing something. And we go through different cycles. We lose some, we stabilize. We lose some, we stabilize. And we lose some, and we stabilize. So it's kind of a multi-death process. But the question is, as we go through that, are we going to let the suffering do its work for the positive, to bring endurance to us, to bring great character to us, and bit by bit make us people of hope? I know that there is huge hope because I've experienced it in my own life. And there's only a couple other things that I mentioned in this talk at the luncheon. Number one is that for those of us visually impaired, it is very stressful to tell people about our eyes because we're worried that they're going to, think we're different or weird or whatever the case is. It's a shameful feeling. And it turns out, through my experience, is that the stress of hiding it, the stress of not telling people, is actually a greater stress than the stress of being vulnerable and just telling people. Because as it turns out, we're okay. And it's going to be okay. And it's going to be okay. And the last thing I talked about was that I've also learned that as we do vocational stuff, many times when we have a physical challenge like an eye disease, in my case, I thought everything was about work. I must be successful because that will maybe cover up who I really am. Well, as it turns out, we're all actually okay, but I thought I must be weird, so if I'm successful. So I worked and I worked and I worked so hard, which all worked good, but it did cause a lot of out of balanceness in my life. And I went through a period where a lot of things were out of whack because I you don't become number one in the world without kind of being a little too obsessed. But I'm now trying, as a senior portfolio manager at a firm called White Box here in town, I'm trying to live a more balanced life. That work is very important. I compete aggressively. I give it all I got. But I also know I have my wife, I have my children, I have my church, my family, my friends, and to try and pursue a life that has a little bit more yin and yang, if you will, or balance between extremes and not getting so far out that I let that go crazy. So I like to talk to people about the 3 F's and a V. So faith, whatever faith tradition you are, get into it because it's a foundation we can all build on. Family, that family is very important. Even if our families aren't healthy, then to find some parts of our family that is healthy. Friends, to be a good friend to others and to allow other people to be a good friend to us. And that takes vulnerability to allow other people to help us. Sometimes we don't realize that allowing them to help us gives them a chance to be great people that they want to become of character. And then lastly, vocation. That whether it's to be a mom as vocation, and what vocation, the word actually means, is a calling. So some type of work, and work is good. Whether it's to be a stay-at-home parent, whether it's to work vocationally in whatever career it's going to be. And I can tell you, in this world today, that the visually impaired has almost all careers open, and that's not an over-exaggeration. I told the story in the presentation that I was on the phone with a Delta Airlines reservation agent, and she said to me, well, if you go to the internet, you'll find this, this, and this. And I said, I'm blind. I can get there. It'll take me a little while because I do use the internet every day with my JAWS technology. And she said, oh, I'm blind too. So the reservation agent at Delta was completely blind. She had me in one ear, and she had the voice technology in the other ear. So if a Delta Airlines reservation agent can bomb around their reservation system and split their brain in two, or I could go become an analyst or the president of a large company, then I know that vocationally we all have our place. Whatever that place is, we have gifts. Only one of our senses is gone. Or, if we have ushers, sometimes two. But we still got 3 or 4 senses left. And if we allow suffering to do its work, and we deal with it, and get right into it, and let it bring endurance, and let it bring us to great character bit by bit, then we will become truly people of hope to go out in the world and bear fruit. Thank you.